Here we are in the Kumite, guys, and today we'll be digging into the trilogy of Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. But first, if you enjoy the content we're creating, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. You can also find us on Breaker, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, and of course, Spotify. So let's get right into it. Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder. This is a trilogy fight. First fight ending in a draw. A lot of people said, Tyson Fury won by decision. Certain people were pushing the narrative that the 10 count was too long for Tyson Fury in that 12th round when he got knocked down. I'm sorry, he did not get knocked down. He got knocked out cold. But just like The Undertaker, he rose from the grave. Second fight, Tyson Fury absolutely steamrolled Deontay Wilder. It looked like it wasn't even a fair fight in there. And then in the final fight, I don't know. Is this the greatest heavyweight boxing match of our era? Now, the first thing to note is that both of these fighters weighed in heavier than either of them ever have. Fury weighed in at a whopping 277 pounds, who during their first fight weighed in at 256, while Wilder weighed in at 238, who during their first fight weighed in at 212. Now, what does this mean? A big piece of Fury's game plan was to come in there and fight as the bigger man. He learned in the second fight that he can tire Wilder out and keep himself out of Wilder's most dangerous ranges by clinching up and putting his weight on him. Wilder wanted to be bigger and stronger to better fight Fury off and to have even more power in his punches. I got to give props to Wilder for actually growing as a boxer for this one. I didn't really expect him to make too many changes due to his habit of going out there and just looking to land his right hand for the knockout. But Wilder was actually mixing in shots to the body to get Fury to back up, and he was feinting in particular ways to make Fury uncomfortable with coming forward. There's a couple times where he caught Fury trying to go in for a clinch a little bit too early, from a little bit too far away. There's a couple times where Fury came in without a jab, came in with his hands up, and Wilder would just find his way right through that guard. So it was a little bit harder for Fury to really put that pressure on him since Deontay Wilder was mixing up the body and actually throwing feints. If Wilder can keep improving on these strategies, then he really does have a chance of getting better from a fundamental standpoint. Credit to Malik Scott for drilling very specific things into Wilder in preparation for this fight. Now, the main thing that Wilder still hasn't fixed is his footwork. You can see many times throughout the fight that Wilder crosses his feet. He squares himself up when he's retreating. This is the main thing that Fury and his trainers capitalized on between the first and second fight, and they were looking to double up on that for this one. Get Wilder back up. Because he's backing up, he's a lot more vulnerable. It takes the power off his punches due to his foot positioning, and it ultimately exposes the obvious holes in his skill set. If Wilder can train these technical flaws out of his footwork, he would be so much more dangerous. If Wilder was dangerous going backwards, all of the rest of the heavyweights are going to have a problem dealing with him. It's a scary fight for anyone. If you can't out-technique Wilder, you're not going to win the fight, and you have to do it flawlessly from start to finish. If he can become dangerous when backing up, it'll make his opponents feel even in more danger when they're approaching him, which that's what he needs at this point now that Fury's kind of laid out a game plan on how to beat Wilder. Now, granted, you still have to have a longer reach than Wilder to do some of the things that Tyson Fury was doing and to punish some of Wilder's flaws in his techniques, his defensive techniques. But still, there's a game plan. If you're heavy set, you might be able to get in on Wilder, tire him out a little bit, push him up against the ropes, keep him on his back foot. Tyson Fury made it a habit throughout the fight to clinch up with Wilder after every combo, or just about every single combo. He did this regardless of how hurt Wilder was. He left almost no room for Wilder to get that shocking knockout. Fury also did very well in the clinch, sneaking a lot of dirty boxing from there. He landed a good few uppercuts, one of which even dropped Wilder. He mostly landed the uppercut when Wilder would actually clinch up with him out of desperation. Such as when he'd get caught by a big 1-2. That was one thing I noticed in this one. Tyson Fury kind of toned down his technique to focus on landing that big 1-2. He really fought his way into landing those big shots by having the superior footwork. He'd cut angles and land hooks on the outside due to Wilder not fully understanding where he needs to plant his feet or move his feet when Fury is closing in on him. Now, let's take a look at all the knockdowns in the fight to see what really went down here. There were a total of 5. Fury getting knocked down twice, and Wilder getting knocked down 3 times, 1 for the finish, 1 for the kill. Round 3, Fury scores a knockdown by throwing a left hook while Wilder's back was against the ropes. Then using that hand to actually pull down the guard of Wilder and landing a big right hook behind the ear. This hurts him really badly, so Wilder looks to clinch up. Fury sees the opening and lands a beautiful uppercut to drop him. He also tags in a nice little left hook just for good measure on the way down. Now, near the end of round 4, Fury steps forward, straight forward, with his hands up. This is a bit out of character for Fury, since he knows that's a very dangerous place to be without entering behind a feint or at least a jab. But Wilder gauges the distance with his lead hand. Kind of looks like Fury might have wanted to parry the jab here of Wilder, but Wilder finds his way right inside the Fury's guard and catches him a big straight. This hurts Fury so bad that I don't think any of the follow-up shots landed. He just ended up falling just seconds later. In that same round, with Fury still being hurt and having a hard time recomposing himself, Wilder has somewhat of a single-handed tie clinch and holds Fury's head there for a big right hook. Here in round 10, and this one is especially pretty, this is my favorite knockdown of the fight, Wilder enters into range with a ripping hook to the body. Then he posts to throw the big left hook, but Fury saw it coming from a mile away, and he rolls just underneath it. From here, Fury posts his shoulder and pivots all of his weight into a crazy powerful straight right to the temple of Wilder. Not bad for a feather duster, eh? And for the ending of this epic trilogy, Wilder and Fury are clinched. Fury lands a dirty uppercut, snapping Wilder's head back. He then frames his forearm on Wilder's neck to throw a big left hook. That just graces the chin. Fury throws out a right hook, which Wilder kind of just stuck his arm out there in defense of, but that right hook finished the fight. With that, I'll go ahead and wrap up my initial thoughts on Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder. Our apologies for getting this one out there kind of late, but we have been incredibly busy working on the local scenes of MMA as of late. This may have been the greatest heavyweight trilogy of our era. Maybe even just the greatest heavyweight fight. Very back and forth. Both men were ready to go out on their shield. A lot of heart. Man, I commend these guys. These are definitely the kinds of fights that boxing needs to put on to maintain their viewer base and to maintain their loyals. Fights like this will get me into boxing and staying in boxing more. I'm definitely appreciative of boxing and all the technique that goes with it. It was the original combat sport. But thank you to everyone who tuned in. Remember, guys, this is not a sport. You don't play fight.